Welcome everyone and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on managing risk for project managers. Did you know that 92% of CEOs agree that information related to risk is important to long-term success, but only 23% of them believe that they have comprehensive information about risk towards their business? My name is Kaylin Saunders and I will be your host for today's session. A brief introduction about us: Invensis Learning is a leading training and certification organization providing globally recognized certification courses such as PMP, Prince2, CAPM, Lean Six Sigma, PMI-ACP, DevOps, COBIT-5, cloud computing, big data, and more. Over 10,000 professionals worldwide have been trained and certified by Invensis Learning for some of the leading Fortune 1000 companies and government organizations across 40-plus countries since 2015. Invensis also hosts webinars on some very interesting topics across various industry verticals, so follow us on LinkedIn and other social media platforms to stay regularly updated on our upcoming webinars. Today's webinar, let me go ahead and get over to Carla. Today's webinar will be presented by Carla Jenkins. She has over 10 years of experience in helping private and public sector businesses increase their profits and productivity while decreasing their costs. Many businesses have benefited from her strategic leadership and cost calculations to streamline their time, money, and people towards greater project success. She is a project management expert, a certified Scrum Master, and a best-selling author on Amazon for her book, Expand Your Personal Brand: 20 Top Business Lessons That Every Professional Should Know to Achieve Branding Success. So just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the Q&A panel, which is on the right side of the screen, and I will bring them up at the end of the presentation. Also, there will be poll questions during the session, so kindly participate to make the session much more interactive. Now, without further ado, I will hand it over to Carla to take this webinar session forward.
Well, thank you very much. I would like to thank both Zach and Kaylin for helping me, and I'm grateful for everyone who attended. So for this webinar, we're going to do managing risk for project managers. So, the goal of this dynamic and exciting session is to learn how to plan, identify, assess, respond, implement, and monitor risk. So my goal today is to help you reduce the bad risks, which are threats, and increase the good risks, which are opportunities. And that's what I want to help you with. I'm also going to help you better understand some project complexity and the risks associated with projects, and to put a stop to unsuccessful projects. So we're going to go a little bit introduction here, a little table of contents. I'm doing managing risk, risk basics, standard risk management tools, specific risk management tools, then some strategies, and then we'll do a recap session. And in between there, we'll have poll questions where Kaylin will help me with. So first section, managing risk. And, as I mentioned, a recent study says project management risk trends, 92% of CEOs agree that the information related to risk is important for long-term success, but only 23 of them believe that they have comprehensive information and risk towards their businesses. And that's very important because that's 1 out of 4, because 4 times 23 is 92. So only 1 out of 4 CEOs believe that they have the infrastructure and the systems necessary to deal with risk management in a long-term setting. And as I mentioned, risk planning is not a one-time event. That's where a lot of people get in trouble. You have to do it throughout. You have to identify risk throughout. You have to do qualitative analysis throughout. You have to monitor your risk throughout. So, with every change request, the next phase domain, new risk spring up. Just like you identify stakeholders throughout project management, you have to do the same with risk planning. So now a little bit about the basics of risk. And I first wanted to start off with the definition of risk and then risk versus issue, because most people get confused with that. The definition, the project management body of knowledge definition of risk, is an event that is uncertain and have a probability of occurrence. And that's different between issue. Risk is an event that hasn't happened. An issue is an event that has happened. And what I'm trying to do through this webinar is to make sure that we keep risk and don't let them to be issues, and that's through identifying, responding, implementing, and monitoring. Your risk management plan is the plan that helps you with your risk assessment, responses, implementation, and monitoring. And then your risk register is a record to keep track of all of the risk activities. So next, the risk report is a report that captures everything. You can use this as a communication tool with your stakeholders and your teams and upper management. It gives you like what you're working on and give you the responses and where you're at regarding risk. And then obviously the risk breakdown structure is like the work breakdown structure. It's a hierarchical. Think of it as the organizational chart, but for risk is where you're prioritizing it. And as I mentioned before, the risk breakdown structure is a great communication tool for the team, the management, and stakeholders. It shows them the risk, who owns it, which stakeholder owns it, the risk, and the responses. So now we're going into just the standard, the general risk management tools and techniques. And the standard that is across board, regardless of whatever, domain, phase, project management process you use for risk, expert judgment. Who are the experts who've been on previous projects, who have dealt with these risks before, data gathering, how you get information to identify the risk, the systems, the tools, and the techniques that you use, your data analysis. It can be a computer software, it can be a spreadsheet, but just your way of synthesizing the risks and breaking them down and qualifying them. Your meetings, where you meet with you and your project team or outside or the vendor on the contract, and then interpersonal and team skills. As a project manager, 90% of our project management tools is communication. You communicate with your team, you communicate with your shareholders, your sponsors, the client. Communication is 90%. So these are just across the board, regardless of whatever you use. These are the standard tools and techniques that you will use during the risk management process. And for data gathering, some of the tools and techniques you use are brainstorming, usually with your group. It can also be with the sponsors, your checklist to make sure that you're going through the steps, and interviews. And the one thing I want to mention about checklists and brainstorming, that too is not a one-time event. If you're doing something like a checklist and you're improving the quality, then you can update the checklist to improve the quality, because you don't want a static checklist where you're just checking off the boxes without really seeing whether or not you're monitoring the risk and qualifying the risk. So next, with data analysis, some of the analysis tools are the SWOT analysis, which is, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We're going to get a little bit more into that with strategies. Root cause analysis, which gets at the underlying issues. Stakeholder analysis, looking at the risk for stakeholders, where they're entering and exiting in the project management phase. Entry and exit of stakeholders have risks attached to them. Simulation, sensitivity analysis, like how sensitive is the risk to becoming an issue. Decision tree analysis, and then influence diagrams, like what is influencing the change, the people, the environment. And then, as I mentioned before, the SWOT analysis is a tool for your strengths, your weakness, your opportunities, and your threats. As I mentioned, negative risks are threats, positive risks are opportunities. And the root cause analysis is to get to the underlying cause. So with this one, you most likely use root cause analysis if you have to do the quantitative, meaning you have to do the numeric. Mostly when you do risk, you qualify the risk, but this is when you have to do. So now I'll turn it over to Kaylin, because we have our first poll question.
Excellent. Thank you, Carla. Which standard data analysis tool or techniques do you use the most? I'm going to go ahead and post this for you so you can go ahead and submit your answers. Let me read that one more time. Which standard data analysis tool or techniques do you use the most? Your options are SWOT analysis, root cause analysis, constraint analysis, or stakeholder analysis? For those of you who can't see the responses, the highest answer was on SWOT analysis at 50%. About 33% use root cause analysis, and about 10% use stakeholder analysis, and nobody uses constraint.
Okay, that's good. Thanks for the participation. So we're going to go into our next section, which is the specific risk management tools and techniques. And that's the prompt list. See what's prompting the list: risk categorization, high, medium, low. You see this a lot in actuaries and also in banking, anything insurance, where you're categorizing your risks, your information systems, what type of system, risk management tool systems that you use, and then audits, where you periodically monitor risk to see whether or not you're taking care of the risk. If you identify it, you're implementing the risk response or the strategy. And also risk audits, perennially, you put a time on it. So are you going to do a daily risk audit, weekly, bi-weekly? But you have to have a specific time period with risk audit. And so next, in addition, I gave a little bit of examples, but we're going to have more definitions, like a predetermined list or risk category. For risk categorization, a metric organized in three categories: your risk, your area, your project most effective, and other useful category. You don't have to use cut and dry paste. You can make the risk category your own. Like if you have specific risks within your own industry or within your own company. As I mentioned, the project information system is a system containing all the tools like your databases. And as I mentioned, your risk audit conducted to see the effectiveness of the risk processes and responses. So now we're at our next poll.
All right, excellent. So this one asks, which specific risk management tool and or technique do you use the most? Hopefully that poll question has already popped up on your screen. The answers options for you are prompt lists, risk categorization, representations of uncertainty, project management information system, or risk audits. Again, the question is, which specific risk management tool and or technique do you use the most? Okay, so it looks like a tie on risk categorization and project management information systems, and nobody had responded to the others.
The next section, risk management strategy. So this is where I want to teach you, like, as I mentioned before, negative risks are threats, positive risks are opportunities, and the goal is to minimize the bad risks and maximize the good risks. So as I mentioned, strategies for threats and opportunities, there are 5 of each, and I've given examples. So we have another poll question: which positive risk strategy do you use?
Okay, and we are opening that poll right now. Your options on risk strategies you use are escalate, enhance, share, accept, or exploit. So it looked like we had 75% escalate and 25% share.
That's great. So now we're going to do the risk strategies for threats first. We're trying to minimize fearing with the accounting system. So they can't communicate, they can't do their Skype for business or anything. Then you have to escalate it to the functional manager or the person in that department. That's outside of your purview. Now, when you do escalate it, you monitor the risk, but you don't really keep track of it, because as a project manager and a project team, that's no longer your responsibility. You sent that over to someone else. The next strategy is to avoid. And what you're trying to do is make sure that you reduce the risk probability to 0. And avoiding the risk eliminates that probability. So an example of that is you and your team avoiding certain suppliers and resources in order to reduce or eliminate the project threats, such as, bottlenecks, quality problems. For the third one for threats is transfer. You mostly use this with insurance, and it's also used with bonds and warrants, and you're transferring this risk to another party. So an example of that, and since this is the season, if you have an oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico, you will purchase hurricane insurance to protect you from any damage during hurricane season. So that's, you're transferring the risk through insurance. The fourth strategy to reduce threats is to mitigate. And what you're doing is you're taking action to reduce the probability of occurrence and or impact. And with this, you usually build a prototype or a model. And so my example is on agile projects, you want to do a live software demo presentation and management to see how the software actually performs once you finish the release. And another example is just taking a sample of confining your software rollout just to one department to see if you can work out the kinks before doing an enterprise rollout throughout the entire company. And so the final risk strategy for threats is accept. And sometimes you have to accept that. But with accept, there's two different types of acceptance. There's passive risk acceptance, where you just routinely monitor the risk to see if it's become bigger, if it's going to become an issue. As I mentioned earlier, issue is something that has happened. So you're monitoring the risk to see the probability of its occurring. And then the active risk acceptance is the contingency reserve. And that's where you hold over the resources just in case a known risk increases in size, so you and your project team would be ready. So now I'm transitioning to positive risk strategies. And with positive risk strategies, the first one is the escalate. The team and sponsor agrees to an opportunity outside the scope of the project. And so my example of that is your software installation project's results can benefit the company beyond just the IT department. So you would escalate that positive opportunity to the functional manager or the manager or of the department that you feel would be able to partake in this positive risk or opportunity. The second one is exploit, where you select a high priority opportunity. The organization will ensure that the opportunity is realized. And in this one, you're trying to increase the probability of occurrence to 100%. So exploit is for positive risk, what avoid is to negative risk. And an example of that is your best worker finishes his work twice as fast as everyone else. So you as the project manager will put him on the longest task to accelerate the project schedule. So the third is share. When you're transferring ownership to a third party, so it's like a joint venture, and sharing your risk is opposite of transferring. So you're not seeking insurance, you're seeking a partner. So you're seeking a joint venture. And my example is this summer, Nike agreed to sell on Amazon, but as part of the paid risk premium, only if Amazon removes all of the fakes and the counterfeit Nike listings from Amazon. So sharing the risk, the contingency for risk sharing involves a paid risk premium to a third party for agreeing to take the risk with you. The fourth one is enhance, and that enhancing opportunity is to increase the profitability and or impact for all opportunity. And with this strategy, you look to enhance early in the project. So my example is adding more people and resources to a task to finish early, and that extra time can be allocated somewhere else in the project. And then finally, accept. And with accept for good or positive risk or negative risk, it's always is passive and it's active. So passive, you do nothing because it's positive risk, it's an opportunity. There's no monitoring, like in the negative risk. And with active risk acceptance, there's contingency reserve, but instead of using it as defense, you're using it as offense. And so we're going to do a recap. The recap, the introduction is the difference between risk. Risk is an uncertain event that has not happened yet. An issue is something that did happen. Your risk management basics are your risk register, where you are chronicling the risk, your risk management plan, giving you an action plan on how you identify, qualify, quantify, plan, implement, and monitor your risk. You have your risk breakdown structure, which is the organizational chart where you rank and prioritize your risk. Your tools and techniques, some of them were, as you mentioned, the SWOT analysis, sensitivity analysis, a root cause analysis, You also have the general of expert judgment, data gathering, data analysis, and as I mentioned, for your risk management strategies, you have five negative risk strategies or threats to mitigate those. That would be to avoid, accept, transfer, mitigate, and escalate. And then the positive risk would be to escalate, exploit, share, accept, and enhance. So now, I believe there's, oh, now it's Kaylin.
That was very impressive to squish all that information into
Yes.
30 minutes. Carla, you did a fantastic
Thank
job.
you.
Thank you for that. And don't forget, everyone, you will be able to receive the recording after this webinar, so you'll be able to listen to it again if you want to, or see the slides as well. We did want to make sure that you knew there is an important announcement. PMI and Axelos have come up with a major update where PMP syllabus is changing from the 5th to the 6th edition, and Prince 2 syllabus is changing from 2009 to 2017 edition. On that note, Invensis Learning is running an exclusive offer for webinar attendees today where you can avail up to 20% discount on both PMP and Prince 2 training. So let me make sure that this offer is available to you. So you should be able to see that on your screen right now. All you have to do is click on the offer to block your seat and you can pay later. This offer is valid for a limited time period only. So you can fill in the form right now. It'll also be emailed to you post-webinar, so you could fill it in then as well. Also, if you're looking at PMP and Prince 2 on-site group training requests, then please email us at corporate@invensislearning.com. With that offer out there, and I know we only have just a few minutes left, but does anyone have any questions? We are now open for questions. You can use the Q&A panel to type in your question. Else we also have an ask a question option, which is a drop-down box near the text box, and we could unmute your line and you can ask the question directly. Let me check out the chat line. I've not seen any questions come through yet. While you're typing any questions you may have, I just want to also point out that our next upcoming webinar is on building team efficiency and effectiveness, the best practice of convergent and divergent thinking skills, with Teresa Lawrence on October 31st at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Eastern. Please make sure that you register for this free live webinar by Invensis Learning. Also follow us on LinkedIn and other social media channels to regularly stay updated about our upcoming webinars and course offers. Okay, I'm looking to see if there are any questions coming through. I have not seen any yet, and I know we're close to the top of the hour. Carla, is there anything else? If you had 2 more minutes, is there anything else you'd want to cover before you wrap up? Free to type your question into that chat box, and I can read it out for you as well. I'm seeing a couple folks asking about the cost of PMP and PMI training. I believe that should be on the Invensis website. This is more information about the free webinar upcoming on the 30th. Okay, I don't see any more questions, so I think we are good to go ahead and wrap up. And hopefully, if she's able to submit her question across here, we can get to that. Again, the recording will be sent out to you after the webinar. Thank you all so much again for your patience. And Carla, thank you for your great presentation
today. Thank you
today.
for having me.
Hopefully, we will look forward to seeing you again soon. Everyone, have a wonderful day.